Revd Dr Ian Paul, Associate Minister of St Nick's Church, Nottingham, General Synod member, Adjunct Professor of New Testament at Fuller Theological Seminary, and official Let's Pray supporter, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I'd like to start with the Greater Love Declaration, which you helped co-author and which has received over 2,600 signatories since its launch a few weeks ago. For those who haven't heard about the Greater Love campaign, can you give us a quick summary of what the declaration is about?
Yes, I can. And I was extremely pleased to be asked to be involved in it. I think it's a really important and really helpful declaration for people to make. And there's some interesting contrasts and connections with the whole discussion about conversion therapy as well. The language of greater love simply comes from Jesus' statement in the farewell discourse in John's Gospel to his disciples saying, well, people will know in the Authorized Version, greater love hath no man than this, that he gives his life for his friends. Now, what's interesting is that that's not primarily a description or a command for relationships in marriage and sexuality. It is actually a principle for the whole of life. And so what the Greater Love Declaration says is, look, this is our guide. This is what Jesus calls us to for the whole of our life together. That is, that we don't find success and happiness and fulfillment by self-seeking and by grasping things for ourselves, but by giving out to others in self-sacrificially. And in the current debates in our culture around marriage and sexuality, that command of Jesus for the whole of life also applies in sex and marriage. And therefore, for those who are married, that you find sexual fulfillment and you find relational fulfillment not by seeking your own satisfaction, but by seeking the good of the other person, by sacrificing, by restraining yourself. And of course, for most denominations in marriage, that's what they say. I'm a minister in the Church of England. And this is exactly what the marriage liturgy says. It says, forsaking all others, will you, in sickness and in health, or for richer, for poorer, and until death do us part, will you give yourself to the other person in service and sacrifice? And that's what builds a strong relationship. So I think it's a really good declaration, and I hope that many more people will sign it.
Why is the Greater Love Declaration so significant with the current proposals for an overbroad conversion therapy ban?
I think because the Greater Love Declaration does two things. First of all, it points to the fact that in relationships there are things which are given. And in particular, the thing that's given to us, and this isn't just a Christian view from Scripture, this is a view of biology. A thing that is given to us is our physical form. We're made male and female. And then we have to make a decision about how we respond to that and whether we will use the structures that God has given us in order to love others, in order to love people selflessly and not seek our own satisfaction, but seek their good first. The whole basis of the conversion therapy ban seems to turn that inside out. It seems to say that it's the interior, it's our attitudes and our dispositions that are fixed and cannot be changed, but actually our bodily forms are negotiable. And so there is the Greater Love Declaration pulls, I think, in two different directions from the whole assumptions and the background with the conversion therapy ban. That's the connection between the two.
And for those watching, you can read and sign the declaration at greaterlove.org.uk. As a minister, what aspects of church life are you concerned could be caught by a conversion therapy ban?
That's a really important question to consider, but I kind of want to give a twist to that question. On the one hand, you might say, well, there are specific things that we want to be free to be able to do. We want to be able to be free to talk about what we believe is the truth, testified in Scripture, also testified in reality and biology, in terms of the givenness of us as humans made in the image of God, made male and female, and that creation order of male and female is actually the foundation for marriage and marriage relationships and therefore expressions of sexuality. I think within the conversion therapy ban, there's lots of contradictory elements. One of the contradictory elements is the idea not just being gay or bisexual or whatever you are in terms of your sexuality, but even believing that you're transgender is something which is innate and given and fixed. And there's a paradox there, because the whole idea of being transgender is that something needs to change, that your bodily form is out of line with your inner sense of who you are, shaped actually by social values. And so there's an idea of change inherent in that. The idea that this commitment to change is somehow fixed seems to me to be paradoxical. And so part of the resistance to the conversion therapy ban as it is is simply saying, hang on, it's incoherent in itself. And we actually want to help people to have a coherent and a well-grounded understanding of who they are and who God has intended them to be.
In 2017, General Synod voted in support of a conversion therapy ban. Do you think it would do so again today?
I don't think that Synod would vote the same way as it did then, and for several reasons. One is that the constitution of Synod itself has shifted in the last set of elections. I think we'd be much more aware of what was going on as well. In 2017, what happened was that some very powerful voices stood up and said, we don't want to harm people, and take it from us, conversion therapy harms people. Now, if you take a group of Christians, any group of Christians, and you say to them, X is going to harm them, we don't want to harm them, therefore shouldn't we ban X? The natural response is to say, of course, let's do that. Of course, we can't possibly collude with harming people. But what failed to happen then was actually us asking some searching and some pressing and intelligent questions about this. Well, what exactly do you mean? One of the slippery things in this whole debate is that there's lack of clarity about what this term conversion therapy means. What a lot of the things that were cited in the discussion are things that are already illegal and are coercive, and no one would want to go ahead with those sort of things. So why are we discussing this anyway? We agree that these things are bad. Why do we need this umbrella term? What is this achieving? What additional things are there? When I've been involved in debate with people and asked the question, what are the things that are currently legal and happening which you want to make illegal? And I've not heard a satisfactory answer.
And why do you think that so many in the Church of England are keen to promote a ban that could actually criminalise the historic teaching of the Church of England on sexuality and gender?
I think the honest answer is that those who are really behind the conversion therapy ban are people who want to see the Church's historical teaching change. And this looks like a good way to force the change if we can't bring that change around through honest debate. And my sense is that those who would really like to see the Church of England's teaching change are beginning to realise that that's not going to happen through the normal processes of theological reflection, of reading of Scripture, of honest discussion one with another, and through the processes of decision making that we have in the Church of England, through the Synod, through the House of Bishops, through the bishops' teaching the faith as they've received it, which is what all of us who are ordained, we make a commitment to do in our ordination vows. So my suspicion is people really realise that the change is not going to come in the way they want, and therefore they've got to find another way through it.
And as an academic yourself, what do you think is the general view among academics of a conversion therapy ban?
I think that, as in all other areas connected with sexuality, the academic view is conflicted and it's been shaped ideologically. I think I'd make a couple of observations from really the point of view of thinking rigorously about it. The first is, and when we had a meeting with government civil servants who were behind implementing this, they were really surprised when we raised these questions. Firstly, the whole language of conversion therapy is highly religious language. And the initial proposals from the government were couched in very religious terms. And when we mentioned this to the civil servants who'd been involved, they were actually extremely surprised. They hadn't realised that, which does make me wonder whether some of the language had actually been fed to them. So the question we asked is, why is the government proposing legislation which is actually speaking in very religious language? I think the second thing, again, is the lack of clarity of definition. Again, in all the discussions I've had, people keep coming to say, well, what do you mean by conversion therapy? The word conversion has a very particular theological meaning. It comes from Jesus' language in Matthew 18 and the King James Version. And within religious context, it has a particular meaning. What does it actually mean in terms of legislation? What specifically are we banning? Again, the question comes up, what is it that is not yet illegal, which now will be made legal? Because, of course, anything that's coercive, anything that is limiting, is an exercise of power, is already illegal.
How can Let Us Pray supporters pray about the government plans to ban conversion therapy?
I think that there are several things really. I think firstly, we'd pray that the government and ministers and civil servants will listen to the whole range of voices and concerns. I think that we should pray that they will respect human rights. And that means respecting all human rights, including the right to freedom of religion, which is part of a fundamental human right. I think also that they will think clearly. The danger is, it feels to me, that those involved in this, both politically and the civil servants who are working behind the background, are actually subject to huge ideological and cultural pressures. And the question I think I would ask, and that's the question we did ask when we met with the civil servants, is will you actually look at this rationally? Will you look at this carefully? Will you resist being pushed into a particular position by cultural and ideological pressures? And those cultural and ideological pressures are very big, very great, and they bring a large amount of pressure to bear on those who are involved in it.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
You're very welcome.